Welcome back once again to Engage People and Drive Change. I'm Jonathan Banks. Today we're going to be talking about redefining our workplace, redefining the future of work, workplace flexibility. These are all things that are on all of our minds. We're trying to get people to come back to the office potentially, or we're trying to figure out what to do with all this office space that's available. But we want to explore what's driving the needs of workplace flexibility and explore how COVID-19 has accelerated the adoption of workplace flexibility. We're going to get into that in just one moment on Engage People and Drive Change. Welcome to Engage People and Drive Change. I'm Jonathan Banks, hosting along with the wonderful Maida Surya. Maida, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm doing really well. It's overcast here in Minneapolis, but we're having a great time here and really excited to go over the topic of workplace flexibility and talk more about that with you. Just before we get started, just a few shameless plugs that we always like to get out there. Number one, we have the Our Best World 2023 conference coming up in St. Paul, Minnesota on August 17th. August 17th. Go ahead and check that out. You can Google it. You can look it up on the next website. However you want to find it, you'll find it. It'd be great to see you there if you're around town. Also, check out Catalyst Advantage. It's the service that helps folks message, measure, and manage challenging change. And it's a really great service that's been helping many organizations do better at developing habits to engage people and drive change. So check that out as well. But Maida, I want to talk with you now about workplace flexibility and some insights that you've been developing around workplace flexibility. First of all, when we talk about workplace flexibility, what exactly are we talking about?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to people's mind is really the whole kind of work from home hybrid, like whatchamacallit. There's kind of like all sorts of variations of flexibility. But I think there's also different like levels of flexibility that you can have. It could be like hours that you put in the organization. I think some folks, have put or have experimented with like 4-day work weeks. That could mean that you still put in 40 hours, 10 hours a day, but you get like 3 weekends off. So there's just a lot of different ways that we can really dive into. And we actually did mention this a little bit in one of our first few episodes where we had a guest speaker and we kind of chatted a little bit about AI and comparing that with, how the world has accelerated through the use of AI and how it's similar to how COVID has accelerated workplace flexibility as well. So just kind of wanting to, make those connections there. But yeah, that's how I would define that.
That's super interesting that you mentioned that, especially like variations of place and space and time that folks are thinking about with workplace flexibility, and harkening back to the changes that AI are bringing to this field or this topic as well. Is go back and check out that episode if you haven't had a chance to check it out. But definitely, AI is something that is rapidly changing the landscape, just like COVID changed the landscape for remote work. And we're calling this workplace flexibility. I'm just thinking about the difference in terminology here, Maida. A lot of times people do say things like remote workplace, hybrid, things of that nature. How does the term workplace flexibility work to our advantage when we're trying to communicate this new way of working?
Yeah, I think, I guess to expand more of what I mentioned earlier, there's like many different ways we can be flexible in the workplace. So I think that terminology covers other areas as well. So something that people may not have heard about is, having like a job sharing like program or process, or even not job sharing, but kind of like PTO sharing. And I think I remember when I was at the University of Minnesota, that was actually a thing where, if you know that you don't typically take time off, and I know some organizations would really make you take the time off, or you can't, accumulate it to the next year and whatnot. But at the University of Minnesota, I remember that there is a program where you can, in a way, if you know you have a colleague that needs like more PTO for whatever reasons, could be caregiving, it could be, caring for, yeah, well, that's still caregiving, like for your child, or for your parents, or for your partner.
Mhm.
You can actually, in a way, like donate your PTO to someone.
Oh,
So I think workplace flexibility covers a lot more than just the office versus at home kind of like conversation. It just covers a lot more
yeah.
in really all aspects of how we do things at work.
Yeah, I love that because we're thinking about the whole person and the whole experience that they're having in terms of their work, but also work as part of their life. And, at Next, one of our core values is being human centered and to think about, the human's entire life and their entire existence and how work plays into that. I can see how workplace flexibility is a much more encompassing term and powerful term and useful term in thinking about how folks have work in their life and what work means to them in their life. But is there some sort of reason why we're interested in workplace flexibility? Why don't we have workplace rigidity or anything like that? Like, why is one better than the other, and how does it help business?
Yeah, I think the reason why we're interested in it, you touch a little bit on like the human centeredness, and I think that's a really key aspect to realizing that when it comes to how we want to engage, retain, like our employees, it's really about meeting the needs of the employees. And so this conversation is especially crucial because you may not really need to actually like spend a lot of money on different kinds of uh, like different events for your workplace to engage your employees. It could be, as I would say, in a way, like simple as refiguring your resources into like giving flexibility to your employees, and that's actually might be what would make them like more satisfied and happier in the workplace, as compared to, okay, we have events or we have free food that's really not meeting my the most basic of my needs. So I think that that's something to think about and consider. But yeah, that's kind of like from my perspective. I'm curious to hear from you, Jonathan.
Yeah, my perspective on this is always evolving, but and because we just learned so much about this, so I'll share an example with you here. So with one of our partners that we're working with right now, um, a major city in the Midwest, um, the idea came up about what about a 4 day work week, not 4 10-hour days, but just having a 4 day work week, 4 8-hour days. How could we use that as a way of, what we're saying here is showing that we have a flexible workplace or instituting workplace flexibility. Now, this is one of those questions that I think is really expansive in the way that it helps our minds think through our current situation, right? Coming up with something that is maybe a little bit out of bounds, something that folks wouldn't even consider, in America here in the United States. 40-hour work week is the standard thing for over 100 years. And that's kind of what the whole workforce is built off of. So to think of a 32-hour full-time work week is something that, makes us just approach the whole idea differently. But there's a couple of factors that I think that are pretty interesting when you think about that. Um, First of all, like, the longer you work in the day doesn't equal being more productive. So saying a 4 10-hour work week is great for squeezing hours in, but not so great for actually making a difference, right? And so uh, making a difference in two facets, I'd say, making a difference in terms of being productive at work, or making a difference in making that person's day better, right? That person's going to be more drowned out, tired, and have a diminished spirit and then just be really looking forward to that 3-day weekend, which is great. But maybe not the harmony that we're looking for overall. So I thought it was very interesting just to think about that concept of a 4-day, 8-hour-a-day work week. Maybe not as a viable option in every system, but definitely as a way of expanding our minds and thinking about workplace flexibility in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's I think a really I would say more contentious way, right, for people to bring that up, and I wonder, in those conversations, like who's at the table to have those conversations and make decisions around that. I guess it's just a perspective that I always think about, like when we're having those kinds of discussions, like who's making the decisions and whose voices are being heard to, in a way, like finalize some of those decisions. So.
Yeah.
But I'm also really glad to hear that there are like different organizations, companies, and departments like thinking about different ways of like how to have flexibility. And I think I would say like innovation is really key, so that we can go off of that example and perhaps like prove or disprove that it can be done. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's where technology comes into play a lot. I think we've seen that when folks have a good way of reporting the right, measures and using technology to really support these types of changes, it's helpful. When you can show the data from the work, the work that folks are doing and have that tell the story of productivity, then it's a lot easier to make these shifts, right? To actually, prove that, hey, where the business isn't failing, this is actually helping the business, or, maybe there's certain things that we're doing together as a team, and we've set up maybe some routines that help us accomplish various, tasks or, goals as a team that require us all to work a certain way. But that's something that's distinct, and we have a process for it, or we have a play that we call to do that. Those are all kind of like thoughts that we want to have organizations really ruminating over and thinking about how they can use these different strategies around workplace flexibility to make their businesses and organizations better, not only for productivity, but also for the people who work there, and most importantly, for the customers they serve and the change that they're trying to make in the world. Meda, I wonder if, we've heard a lot about the hybrid work model. I wonder if you have any thoughts about, first of all, the term hybrid work model, but also how that you see that being implemented or adopted and across the workplace.
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, like different organizations really do it differently. And I think the reasons for that are also like varied in a lot of different ways. So I think some of the models that I've heard is, having a specific number of days in the office and specific number of days at home. So I think quite a number of my like networks have a kind of, it's either a 3-day in the office or 3-day at home, a variation of some sort, where then the other 2 days would be in the office or at home. And some organizations, even with the same number of days in office or at home, have specific days where they want specific teams to be in the office or at home. And I think it's really just interesting to see that play out, especially because again, like during COVID, I think a lot of companies had to downsize their office. And so I remember, I think one of my networks was kind of like telling me of how they're actually quite frustrated because they have this like hot seat model. They have to, in a way, like book their seats ahead of time. And, it gets to a point where like, what's the point of like forcing us to come to the office when we don't have like the infrastructure set up in the first place to be able to like, in a way, like work productively, right? I think, as you know, like a lot of my networks are in the DEI or even HR space. And so I think one of them was telling me that it's a struggle to come to the office because mean, as much as they want to like collaborate and do all of that, especially if they're like in the HR team and having this hot seat model, they can't really have like private or important conversations
True.
because the office is just like really open, or they have to like again like book a separate like meeting room to have like certain conversations with certain employees. And so I just thought that was like really interesting. I think yeah, like some organizations really like leave it up to the manager's discretion. And I think that can go in a really good way or in a not so great way where, okay, perhaps like the standard or the guideline for the organization is again 3 day, 2 to 3 days of in office or at home. That's usually kind of like the norm. But, despite that, I think there may be some managers who would either have who would in a way like want all of their employees to just work from home for whatever reason, or like have their employees all come to the office. So then I think then the experience is different from depending on like what managers you have, especially when that line of, well, yeah, these are our guidelines, but it's up to your manager's discretion. So I mean, I think it can, as I say, it can go in like really different ways. If let's say, it can be a good thing where if in a way you're forced to come to the office, but your manager has the discretion and you still have like the flexible work arrangement, that might be a good thing. So I think, yeah, it's kind of like reasons for like why certain things are being set a certain way, and having the whole organization be on board is pretty important there. I could definitely go more on and on about like different examples and whatnot, but I'll just pause
Yeah.
there to let you chime in, Jonathan.
Well, yeah, and I definitely want to talk about some of the legal ramifications and things like that in this conversation too. And as we kind of work our way to that topic, I'm thinking that it's really difficult for organizations to understand the level of hospitality they need to provide to their workforce. And by hospitality, I mean, how intentional are you about the space that folks are coming to and their experience within it? And a lot of for a lot of years, for like the existence of the kind of, if you'd say, modern workplace, you'd say that the building and the facilities and the decor kind of did most of that work to create that sense of hospitality. But yeah, now you think about folks who are coming in who've had this really solid experience about creating their own workplace and their own work environment, that they have afforded them certain things. And so, how do you continue that sense of hospitality in your organization and make it part of the culture? Is there certain routines that happen throughout the day? Are there certain types of I guess ceremonies that take place? I go back to elementary school. There's in the morning, there's bell rules, the bell rings, and then there's daily announcements. Those are a value add. For being in school, it might be repetitive and things like that, but it's something you don't get if you're not there. And there's certain things like that we have to be thinking about for our workplace. What are some things that we offer value that you can only get if you're there? And is that enough to bring people in, or do we need to maybe consolidate a number of those on a day so everybody has a reason to be there, because there's actually something offered that's distinct and valuable that can't be found at home. I wonder what types of legal ramifications are on your mind when it comes to workplace flexibility.
Oh, legal.
Or policy, either of those.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm not sure specifically to legal, but I think from a policy standpoint, as I kind of mentioned earlier in the example of, you have a certain specific guideline, but if you have a kind of like a note or a side line where it's at the end of the day up to your manager's discretion, I think that's where things can get really like messy and chaotic and vague. And I think that runs into the danger of like, well, what's the point of having a guideline when pretty much every manager is kind of wanting to set their own rules for like how they want to do things, and
Absolutely.
not everyone's like following the same guideline or policy as to the flexible working arrangement. I mean, yeah. At the same time, I'm also pausing a little bit on that because it also doesn't mean that, oh, everyone has to be, treated the same way if you're thinking about the definition of equality versus equity. But I think there has to be something said there about, again, like the reasons why managers would have discretions. And I think it will be valuable to collect data like, okay, is there a reason why certain groups won't come to the office at all? Is there a reason why certain
Mhm.
departments have to be in the office all of the times? I think some of the examples around that would be, if you think about folks who have, perhaps like an engineering department where they have to, work on a specific product. They do have to be in the office all the time, right? And so I think imposing that on everyone else may not really be the equitable thing to do. It is, treating everyone equally, getting everyone to be uh, in the office, but is that like absolutely necessary? I don't think so. And so I
Mhm.
think just having that distinction and having discussions internally as to like, does this like make sense for the organization to, roll things out in a certain way? I would say like that's the key piece of it. But yeah, again, I'll just pause there. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I love it because there's a few different facets to it. One is that I think that you can make it work. And by saying, but when I say that, what I mean is that you can have some rigidity around your workplace. You can say everybody has to be here 9 to 5 every Monday through Friday or whatever it is. You can come out and say that. That's not the biggest issue. You know, the biggest issue isn't that you said that everybody has to be there. Actually, the biggest issue is the equity issue that comes into play. How does everybody have the same chance to be there nine to five? How have we made it so all of our staff can get there and be there from 9 to 5? So if you're putting that out there, then you have to put it out there in an equitable way. And what you're going to be saying then is, we're going to choose to be equitable, and we're not going to choose to be equitable. Or we're going to choose to, exclude folks who can't comply with this and can't also, make it there without the types of supports that we're not affording them. So I think that it definitely builds the culture of the organization. You could definitely have a culture of an organization that maybe has more workplace flexibility, but when you take a look at it at an equity lens, you want to make sure that you're playing it right there, and that no matter where folks are coming from, that they're provided the opportunity and the support to take advantage of that opportunity from wherever they're starting from. So I really kind of like diving into that a little bit more, and I think it's a step forward for organizations who are using that type of lens in the way that they look at their flexible workplace arrangements. Um,
Mhm.
well, how might you go about creating a flexible work culture, Mado?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the culture piece is really the most crucial, but feels most like intangible. But I think when it comes to culture, it really always starts at the top. I think as much as there is bottom up like approaches, I think top down approaches of get having leadership buy-in, making sure that like all levels of the organizations, like managers, other leaders alike, are understanding again like the whole point of the flexible work culture is really what would kind of like strengthen the value of like flexibility in the workplace. So I think you touch upon it where the number of hours that you put in doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be more productive. I think there is some unspoken cultures per se, where staying longer means that you're more dedicated or you're like more hardworking. When in fact, like, okay, if I can do the work in like 3 hours and someone else is doing it in 8 hours, I think I'm more productive in that sense, and I can get the work done. And so I think valuing outcomes over like number of hours work is something that we want to think about as well, and having trust in the employees that again, like as long as they get their stuff done, I think it really doesn't, we don't have to like question how they spend every hour or minute of their day. I think as long as they meet the goals that they need to meet, So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry. Please finish.
Yeah, I think one last slightly relevant point that I would touch is also uh, it does take some steps and time to get there because I think, especially when we think about like COVID, I think by now maybe we're like more used to it. But COVID has really kind of proven that we can do like a lot of the work like from home, and what I'm trying to get at here is getting the support structures to, get to the point where employees can manage their time effectively is another like key as well that I think people don't really think about a lot. I think all of us went on that journey in 2020 all the way to 2021 or 2022 of like figuring out, okay, how do I kind of balance my life and how do I manage my time so that I can get the work done and not have things have to like spill over to my personal life and
Mm.
and whatever it is that y'all had to figure out it during that time. But yeah, that was the last point I wanted to mention.
Yeah, great point. And yeah, go ahead and shut those laptops down at the end of the day and call it a day. Disconnect, enjoy some time to unwind. And I think a lot of us will do live a very integrated life. It's not like the things we do in work are that far away from what we do in our personal lives. And, my example is, coaching my son's football team. I do a lot of coaching in my work here at Next every day and do coaching with football too. And there's parallels there. It all kind of comes together. And in a lot of ways, I think that is how our natural human existence is. Before we chopped ourselves up into 24-hour days and 365-day years and 8-hour work days and all this sort of stuff. It was more about the flow and what we had to do to integrate and live as people. And from a human-centered perspective, we want to keep an eye on that. We don't want to do things that are, too against our nature for the sake of productivity or whatever it might be. This has been a fascinating topic, Maida. We'll continue to talk about this, not only on the show, but with our partners who, we've engaged with on these topics already. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share, Maida, before we head out of here?
No, I think I'm good. As in, I might, but I don't want to ramble too long into
You don't want to
another
start a whole other episode? Is that what you're saying?
next time. Tune in next time, and we'll have more to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Maida. Thank you for this topic. Thanks everybody for watching. Yeah, don't forget Our Best World 2023, August 17th in St. Paul at the Como Zoo and Conservatory. Looking forward to seeing you all there. Find out more at ourbestworld.com. We will talk to you all soon. See you on the next episode of Engage People and Drive Change.
Thanks, everyone.